We work in the dark to serve the light. We are assassins. Here's your look at the NECA toys. Assassin's Creed Revelations, Ezio Auditore, the Mentor. From Assassin's Creed Revelations comes this highly detailed Ezio action figure. With improved articulation and updated paint, Ezio Auditore stands 7 inches in scale and has over 35 points of articulation. The figure includes interchangeable hands, daggers, sword, and crossbow weapons, along with his signature extending wrist blades. Also, he comes with window box packaging to be perfect addition to your collection. Now that Ezio is older, he's starting to show a few more grays. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the NECA Toys Assassin's Creed Revelations Ezio Auditore, the Mentor, I'd like to thank the folks over at NECA that did provide the sample we could have a look at. Ezio the Mentor should be available right now, either in-store or online. Pick your poison as to which way you like to purchase your figures. The figure, though, is still going to stand at about 7 inches in height, or Ezio is going to be about 17.5 centimeters tall. Ezio the Mentor, meet Ezio the Assassin. Here's what the figure looks like with the earlier looked at Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Ezio Auditore, Legendary Assassin. Decent looking figure. My only real complaint about him was, maybe not with the hood on right now, no, but he happened to swap off the head sculpt for the unmasked portrait, which doesn't actually come included though with this version of Ezio Auditore. I couldn't help but notice his head was way too small. While maybe skimping on small heads, Mentor Ezio still manages to pull in a long laundry list of accessories. Though of the list that we get, only 3 of them are unique to this figure. All the remaining ones that you'll be seeing in a second were all the ones that got packed along with the Legendary Assassin version of Auditore. Like, for example, the crossbow. I mean, it'd be easy for me to easily say that. It probably would be a lot bigger of a help if I could just bring in the original one so you guys can see the differences between the two. And there isn't any differences at all. The molds are exactly the same. I might say maybe perhaps the Mentor version of Ezio might have a slightly shinier crossbow, but they are identical accessories to one another. He does also come included with the exact same hand for holding the crossbow. It's this hand here. You just basically take the hand, you fit it in between the handle and the guard, just like that, and he holds the crossbow perfectly fine. The other Ezio, by the way, I had on the shelf displayed with said crossbow. Well, I guess not necessarily this crossbow, the one that came included with that figure, and I have it actually with this hand here. The figure, I did take one thing. I already removed the hand that was on this side of the figure's body. He did technically come included with 2 closed fists, a pair of closed fists on the ends of either forearm. I just removed one of them in favor of a gripping hand. He does also have another gripping hand, although the difference between the two, this one has the thumb up, this one's just basically a gripping version. The figure also as well comes included with a pair of relaxed hands. All the things we've already now looked at are all the same ones that came included with the other figure, so we're not getting anything new in that end of things. We are also getting the exact same hidden blade. Just reaching off to the side and grabbing the pair of hidden blades that came included with the other Ezio. Exactly, again, the same, other than the fact that he trades in one of the hidden blades in favor of a hidden hook. The hook blade works the exact same way as it slides up his sleeve. In fact, when you're looking at the figure, located on the side, it works basically the exact same way. There's a little gap right there. Can you see in between his wrists and his guard here? You're basically taking the hook blade, and that just slides in place. It slides fairly well. I mean, you kind of have to navigate it in there, but eventually it does fit in there fairly well. And you can also, again, take the hidden blade, and that slides in there also as well. Just want to make sure that his hand is out of the way. If his hand's turned this way, for example, it's going to be next to impossible to get the blade in there. So we want to make sure it's just facing side. Actually, what they've also done, too, if you look at the way they've done the hands have a hinge right there, but they're also slightly more recessed, it seems, so it's a little bit easier to kind of guide the blade in there, and he holds it pretty well. So again, instead of getting 2, he only gets 1 this time. Things that are, though, unique to the figure outside the hook blade is that the figure also comes included with 2 swords. Well, 1 dagger, 1 sword. First of all, he comes included with a Macedonian dagger. I wanted to actually look at the sword first, but I figured we'd look at this one first. The Macedonian dagger actually is nicely molded here in silver. It's got a little bit of additional black there on the end of the handle. The reason why I wanted to kind of beeline it away from the sword first and look at this is that the dagger does have a storage space. Located on the front, there is a sheath. You can see right by the sash of his belt. You basically can then sheath the dagger. There's some nice little storage there. And while that's stored away, now we can go back to the thing I really did want to look at, the yet again sword. The sword itself is, again, unique to this figure, molded still in the nice silver plastic with some really nice decorative details right by the hilt. The hilt is also painted nicely there in black, and of course, being that he now has, well, he had it before, he has a gripping hand. You basically just take the hand and you hold the sword. The sword, I will say, though, sits a little loose, so you can kind of take the sword and twist it slightly. But honestly, though, the best hand for really holding the sword is the hand that he has right now. The one that has the thumb sticking up, ironically enough, is the one that's best suited for holding the sword. And you just, like I said, take the yet again sword and sheath it. I suppose not even sheath it. You slide it into the grip of his hands. There's, by the way, no additional storage anywhere on the back of the figure's body. I thought, for example, this little looplet right here, for example, you could take maybe the sword and slide it in there. The only thing that would come with that, though, is the caution of turning then the figure around, just in case you, like if you bent the figure back, for example, I would worry that that would start to bend the plastic on the sword. So we're just going to unsheath, as somewhat sheathed I did for the sword. I'm just going to unsheath and put it off to the side. So those are all the accessories that come included, though, with this version of Ezio. One thing that's notable, though, about this figure is while he is somewhat of a similar style of suit, similar style of costume, obviously very differently detailed here and a lot nicer color. I kind of like the darker gray, to be honest. I know when I tend to think of Assassin's Creed, and especially Ezio, I tend to think of him more with the lighter color outfit myself. I kind of like the way they've painted this one. I mean, obviously, it isn't the exact same. He's got some additional guards there as well. The thing that's kind of rather interesting, though, about it, and I didn't even notice it on this version of Ezio, is that if you look at this figure, now, granted, on the one on the back here, the original Ezio did have this cape piece that draped over top of the back of his shoulder, and he also had this part of his kind of bandolier, like belt area, that's just draped over top the back of his body. You already see what I'm talking about? Right there. Right there. He has one right there too, but it was so concealed by the cape piece that went over it. By now giving us a different type of figure that doesn't have any of that, you can see there's a lot more of these noticeable screw holes on the back of the figure's body. I can't recall the last time we've actually gotten ourselves a NECA figure where it has visible screws on the back of his body. I would imagine it's obviously there more to take the front half and the back half of the figure's body, sandwich it together, and then they're probably just taking the screw holes and screws and tightening everything together that way as opposed to using glue. But the thing about it, though, is now without having the additional cape piece that the original legendary assassin Ezio would have had, and now only having just this strap piece, it's more than visible, definitely more apparent that the figure does have these additional screw holes. Now, you never would notice it, obviously, if you're looking at the figure from the back, and I can't imagine many people are going to be displaying the figure on the shelf looking like that. Who's going to be displaying their Ezio, or any figure for that matter, backwards like this? But if you do turn him around, though, you will very obviously notice that there's some screw holes on the back of his body. Looking, though, at the front of the figure's face. Bringing back in, though, the original Ezio. The faces are very similar, although you notice, though, that the Mentor version of Ezio has a slightly longer beard. This one has a little bit more of a shorter beard. And instead of, though, having a hood that fans to the sides like this, the Mentor version of Ezio does actually wrap it around. So he's actually got more of a very fully developed hood. Some really nice decorative details there also on the side. Now, while he doesn't have, though, the means, while he doesn't have an alternate head sculpt, for example, and one of my big talking points of the original Ezio was the fact that the unmasked portrait, or the unhooded head sculpt, kind of made it more apparent that the figure's head was way too small. If you did want to, though, you could, though, take this head off the ball peg, because the pegs are exactly the same. And you could plug on the unhelmeted, I keep wanting to say unhelmeted, I'm so used to saying unhelmeted in reviews. You can take, though, the unhooded version of Ezio and plug it in place. It still draws no more attention to the idea that I feel like the head sculpts are way too small. I mean, obviously, I could probably push that down a little bit lower down on the neck. But yeah, the head does work, although, again, it's just way too small for the figure's body. Just going to pop that off, replacing back with a superior head sculpt, and just pop that back in place. Yeah, I do like the way they've sculpted the hood, some nice additional scrolling that they've painted there in a slightly lighter gray. This dark and light gray contrast work really well because it's all over the figure's body. There are a few little areas of red, for example, like his sash there on the front. I mean, but again, nice little layers of plastic. All soft plastic, by the way. The lower half of his skirting, for example, is made up of layers upon layers of just soft plastic. So it makes things really quite easy to move Ezio's legs forward and back, and we'll kind of all talk about that when we talk about more of the articulation. The additional fur now he has on the sides would not have been there on the original one. And again, it's not just the case. Maybe they're using, no, I'm looking at it. It doesn't look like they're using, even like, I thought perhaps like even the underlayer would be a little bit different. But this one has some additional stitching there on the sides. This version of Ezio doesn't have that. So it looks like they may have used a brand new body, or they may have maybe started with this as the basic body and then just added the additional tooling of the sculpt over top of it. But it does seem like the very much different bodies really between the two. Even like the boots are completely different from one another. Sculpting, even like the feet. The feet have more pointier soles on the Mentor version, slightly more rounded shoes on the original legendary assassin. Okay. Let's talk about the figure's articulation. It's going to be pretty much the same as the Legendary's version, so the head's going to rotate back and forth. It's on that ball post. Head looks up about that high. looks down about that low. Because this is, by the way, softer plastic, even if you are deciding to move the head a little bit lower down, the hood goes along with it. It doesn't feel like it fights with you, and that's a good thing. Head does also rock back and forth ever so slightly. The shoulders come out, and even with the shoulders the way that they're designed, this shoulder gets out of the way, this fur piece that he has. This one gets a little bit more hung up, but if you just untuck this every single time you're doing this with the arm then comes out at 90 degrees. You take the arms, and you could, in theory, rotate them all the way around, but you're really going to be fighting with the softer plastic that they have for the shoulder pads. The figure does have a bicep swivel. He only still possesses a single hinge in the elbow, which really, again, with how much volume he has here on the bicep, not to mention the guard that he has below as well, there's only so much bend you can actually get out of this figure. That's about it. The arms do rotate back and forth. The hand do rotate also all the way around. He has an upper torso crunch, as well as a rotational swivel in his waist. The legs split out for Ezio, as well as you can take the legs and move forward, move them back. If we peel away the curtains, by the way, the figure does have a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Does possess, though, a double hinge on the knee, which is good to see. Rotation here where the boot is actually attached to the calf. And then he only has just a single hinge here. I mean, not that he would have any more than a single hinge. It does rock back and forth, and the figure does also have toe articulation, although it's really tight on this figure. All in all, though, I mean, even though it's not the traditional colors that I tend to think of when it comes to Ezio Auditore, just bringing back in the one I tend to think of more, I gotta say I really like the colors and the costume a lot more, though, on the Mentor version of Ezio. Still, though, it's very funny, though, that when I looked at this version of Ezio, even though the figure had possessed it all the time, I never noticed at all that he had screws on the back of the figure's body. A lot of that can be contributed to the fact that he does have the cape that drapes over one side, and then, of course, he's got the belt that drapes over the other side. I mean, other than maybe being pointed out in that direction, I don't think anybody would be any bit the wiser that it's actually there. It becomes, though, a little bit more apparent, though, when you look at the Mentor version, because, again, he doesn't have that section on one side, and he does have a belt that kind of, again, shifts around. He does have, then, a notable section of screws. Obviously, you're not going to be looking at, I'm sure, you're not going to be looking at the figure from the back like that. You really will want to be showcasing and shining this guy on your shelf front and center. And obviously, with the guy having so many accessories, even though, really, to be fair, some of the accessories, majority of the accessories, like 3/4 of them, were all the ones that got packed already with the Legendary Assassin version of Ezio. So you're not getting a lot new there. But you are, though, technically getting the hook blade. You are getting, again, the Macedonian dagger and the Yataghan sword that you could have then displayed either with this version of Ezio that we looked at in this review, or hey, why not? Share it around. You can also pass it over as well to the Legendary Assassin version of Ezio as well. Trading in his trademark costume, now for something darker gray. The wiser version of Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed Revelations, and of course the folks over at NECA Toys. Between both offerings that the company has now given us, I gotta say I like the Revelations just a little bit more. It's not, yes, the thought of colors when you usually think of Ezio, you think of all like the white cloak costume that he has with all those nice bright red accents. He gets instead now really dark gray. But I gotta say, like the coloring that they use for the gray, it's not even just gray on its own either. It almost has like a greenish tint to it. It's a really interesting color. And then, of course, you have the talented artists over at NECA Toys have added all the additional scrolling at the bottom of his jacket, all of course, around his hood area there as well. There's a lot of cool stuff going on with this costume that you don't get as much the chance to see when we looked at the Legendary Assassin. Granted, he gets a lot of hand-me-downs. The three-quarters, well, I guess almost the majority of the accessories that come included with the figure, for example, are all ones that we already got with the Legendary Assassin. He gets at least the benefit to trading in one of his hidden blades in favor of a hook blade. And of course, he also gets the Macedonian dagger and the Yataghan sword. So he gets three things that weren't really packed with the other figure. One thing he doesn't get, though, is the shrunken down head sculpt, which again, was the one thing I really didn't like about the other figure, but I'm never really going to be displaying that version of Ezio anyways with the unhooded head sculpt. You could use it for this one if you wanted to. They were at least smart enough to use the same universally sized peg post. Of the two figures, though, what do you guys like more? Let me know down below in the comments section. Do you prefer the Assassin's Creed Revelations Ezio Auditore, or do you like more the Brotherhood versions? Let me know down below in the comments section. Big thank you once again to the folks over at NECA Toys that did provide the sample of the brand new Assassin's Creed Revelations. This time we were looking, though, at the Mentor Ezio Auditore, and what a nice looking figure he is. Yes, he is a little limited on articulation when it comes to his elbows. That's one other thing that kind of really wish that this figure line could have had a little bit of benefit. I mean, he obviously has double hinges in his knees. I wish they probably could have done something similar to his elbows so you'd be able to move his elbows a little bit more. And then, of course, there's the obvious, he has screw holes on the back of his body. You're never really going to see it anyways, but I mean, obviously, if you ever get a chance to turn the figure around, you're going to notice it a little bit more on this figure than what you would before on the Brotherhood. But again, a big thank you to folks over at NECA Toys that did provide this sample. This guy is available as well as Brotherhood's Ezio Auditore, either online or in stores. I fare better, it seems, as a Canadian collector to buy a lot of my stuff online. Buying them in stores, next to nothing. Distribution here in Canada isn't the greatest. I mean, it's not even just for NECA. It's just across the board. We don't tend to get a lot of new figures here in Canada. Hopefully that's something that's going to be changing. But this guy, like I said, is available right now if you're interested to grab this one for yourself. If you guys did enjoy this video, want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and would like to stick around for more, even though we are wrapping things right now for Assassin's Creed, there are going to be more NECA reviews coming your way. So make sure you come back on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.